Hello and welcome. Today's session focuses on the Autumn 2024 Chief Examiner Report for the T level in Digital Support Services, specifically the core papers A and B. And the focus of this session is to review performance patterns, highlight strengths and misconceptions, and suggest approaches to support future delivery. So paper A focused on business context, digital environments, diversity and planning, whilst paper B examined support services, communication, tools and testing, legislation and data analysis. We'll structure this session around the successes, challenges, patterns and practical teaching implications. So we'll start by looking at some of the key themes arising on core paper A. In core paper A, students showed a strong grasp of key business and digital themes. Many were able to clearly explain the impact of digitalisation on organisations and how digital service companies can enhance customer experience. This was particularly evident in responses to question 1, 4 and 5, where students demonstrated both theoretical knowledge and real-world application. Questions 3 and 7 stood out for their focus on digital well-being and sustainability. Here, students successfully applied mitigation techniques for safeguarding well-being and understood the implications of digital carbon footprints, showing an encouraging awareness of wider sector responsibilities. We also saw high-quality extended responses in the 15-mark questions, especially questions 10 and 19. These were typically well-structured, evaluative and aligned to Band 3 criteria, indicating that students were planning their responses and drawing appropriate conclusions. In terms of technical knowledge, question 12 highlighted a secure understanding of TCP and IP layers, and question 15A and 16A confirmed that students are gaining confidence with concepts like resilient environments and digital inclusion. These areas are clearly being delivered effectively and students are engaging well with them. While there were several strengths in paper A, some key areas for improvement also emerged. Firstly, many students misinterpreted command words, particularly discuss, analyse and evaluate. This often resulted in responses that were descriptive rather than analytical and limited their access to higher mark bands. It's crucial that students are taught how to unpack these command terms and understand the level of depth required. Another common issue was that reasoning and conclusions were missing, especially in extended questions. Even when students had the knowledge, they often didn't go far enough to justify their answers or offer balanced conclusions, which is essential for Band 3 performance. We also saw a number of incomplete or skipped questions, indicating potential issues with time management or confidence. Supporting students with exam pacing strategies and encouraging them to attempt every question, even briefly, could help here. In terms of content understanding, question 18 on cloud services revealed gaps. Students often confused software as a service with specific tools or platforms like Office 365 or SharePoint, rather than explaining the service model. Similarly, question 17 on diversity in leadership lacked depth. Many students identified issues but failed to explore how demographic imbalances could be addressed or why this matters in a digital organisation. These trends suggest a need to reinforce question deconstruction, scenario application and structured evaluation in your delivery. This visual performance pattern highlights the questions where students either excelled or struggled significantly in core paper A. So let's begin with the lower performing questions in red. Question 17, which asked students how to assess how a tech company could address demographic imbalances in leadership, often lacked depth. Students tended to identify the issue but didn't go on to evaluate solutions or provide reasoned conclusions. Question 18 on cloud services was frequently misunderstood. Instead of evaluating service models, Many students incorrectly described specific tools such as Office 365, showing a gap in foundational cloud knowledge. And question 20, which explored the stages of design thinking, was another area where many students struggled, suggesting that this content area may need to be revisited in schemes of work. On the positive side, several questions saw a notable number of Band 3 responses. Question 10, the 15-mark question on evaluating an app's value to users, was answered very well. Students showed strong structure, relevant arguments, and effective use of knowledge in context. Question 19, which looked at network infrastructure recommendations, also demonstrated that students could apply technical understanding in a scenario-based setting. And finally, question 16A, which explored principles of digital inclusion, revealed a strong grasp of equitable access and inclusive design, topics that clearly resonated with learners. These insights show us where students are most confident and where further support is needed. From the Autumn 2024 assessment series, several key themes emerged that can help shape future teaching and learning strategies. Firstly, it's clear that vocabulary and command verbs have a significant impact on performance. When students misunderstand terms like analyse or evaluate, their responses fall short of the depth required, resulting in band 1 or 2 marks. Building familiarity with these through regular retrieval and modelling is essential. Secondly, students who planned and structured their responses, especially for extended questions, performed noticeably better. Responses with a clear beginning, middle and a conclusion, supported by examples or case details, consistently scored higher. So encouraging use of structures like PEAL, which is point, evidence, explain, evaluate, link, could support with this. Another important trend was that students with confident topic knowledge were more likely to apply it effectively to an unfamiliar context. This shows the importance of secure subject teaching before introducing application. Finally, scenario-based practice made a real difference. When students had experience working through realistic or industry-aligned situations in class, they were far more confident in doing so in the exam. Embedding this style of question into everyday lessons will not only boost skills, but also exam resilience. So, based on the analysis of Paper A, there are 3 key areas where targeted teaching strategies could make a big difference. So firstly, focus on command words. Students need to recognise and understand what's being asked of them, whether to describe, explain, discuss or evaluate. Using quick reference guides for verbs and regularly practicing question deconstruction as a class will build confidence and reduce misinterpretation. Secondly, invest in extended answer practice. Encourage students to plan their responses using models and exemplars of Band 3 work. Peer reviewing responses and scaffolding answers with frameworks like PEAL, the point, evidence, explain, evaluate, link, can support structure and depth. And finally, provide focused content support. The report highlighted areas such as design thinking, cloud service models and digital inclusion as common weak spots, so revisit these through interactive activities and check for understanding. Also try to use diverse workplace scenarios in your examples so students can see how their knowledge applies in real-life digital settings. These approaches, if embedded consistently, should support students in accessing higher bands and developing more confident, exam-ready responses. So now we'll move on to the key themes arising on Core Paper B. So Paper B focused more on technical application, infrastructure and data, and overall students performed well across a range of these areas. Starting with communication and troubleshooting, students were confident in questions 1 to 4, identifying why support services engage with stakeholders and how frameworks can aid problem resolution. This shows that learners understand the operational side of digital support. There was also strong performance in root cause analysis, particularly in question 5A and 15. Students successfully identified methods and explained how these approaches could be used to investigate and solve digital issues, suggesting that diagnostic strategies are well taught and understood. In question 11, students demonstrated a good grasp of agile frameworks, and question 14A revealed their familiarity with collaborative tools, though it is worth noting here that weaker responses sometimes listed tools within the same category rather than offering a broader range. On the security side, questions 25 and 26 saw very strong answers. Students were able to articulate the role of IAAA elements and discuss the impact of unauthorised access with reasoned evaluation, often hitting band 3 marks. And lastly, in data and digital analysis, questions such as 29 and 31 were answered with confidence. Students demonstrated their ability to apply concepts such as predictive analytics and algorithms in practical contexts, showing real understanding of how digital systems inform business decisions. These strengths are encouraging and reflect well on classroom delivery in these topic areas. Despite the positive performance in many areas, there were some recurring issues in Paper B that affected marks. A key challenge was around terminology in question 13B, for example, where students confused black box testing with black hat hackers, which shows the need to reinforce both definitions and contextual understanding of technical terms. In questions 16 and 24, students were asked to evaluate cloud testing and VPN protocols. These were often answered superficially. Many students didn't offer a clear evaluation or failed to draw a conclusion, making it difficult for them to access higher mark bands. Another noticeable weakness was in question 35, where students were asked to compare database models like hierarchical, network and entity relationship models. Most responses showed limited understanding of these concepts, with some students leaving this question blank altogether. Even in questions where students started strong, such as questions 8, 9 and 30B, many missed marks by not fully explaining their answers. This suggests a need to build more awareness of what's required to earn the second or third mark, so moving beyond identification into explanation and application. And then finally, question 12, which asked students to identify evaluation tools, was often answered with generic or incorrect tools, highlighting a gap in knowledge of business-focused digital evaluation methods. These patterns suggest that while foundational knowledge is present in many cases, depth, terminology, clarity and full explanations are areas to strengthen going forward. This visual summary highlights the questions in Paper B where students either excelled or struggled, giving us a clearer picture of strengths and development areas. Firstly, we'll look at the low performance questions. So question 12, this focused on evaluation tools and showed that students were unsure of what constitutes a tool versus a general process or platform. This led to vague or incorrect answers. Question 16 on stress testing cloud services was also problematic. Students often listed benefits without explaining why stress testing was necessary or how it applies to the given context. Question 4, asking for evaluation of a VPN protocol, lacked depth in many cases. Responses tended to be descriptive rather than evaluative, and conclusions were often missing. And then question 35, which required comparison of database models, had one of the weakest response rates. Many students lacked the foundational understanding needed to even attempt this question. Now moving on to the higher band 3 responses. So question 25 asked students to apply one of the IAAA elements to a digital health portal. This question was well understood and many students produced developed answers with strong practical relevance. In question 26, which focused on unauthorised access, Students clearly understood the risks and were able to evaluate both technical and non-technical vulnerabilities, often reaching Band 3. For question 29B on predictive analytics, also saw some confident responses. Students applied real-world examples, such as content recommendations, to show how analytics influence decision-making. And then question 31, which covered the application of algorithms, was another strong area, with students able to explain benefits like automation, efficiency and accuracy in a business setting. These patterns suggest students are strongest where application meets real-world context and weaker where abstract theory is required without practical grounding. So overall, from Paper B, we can identify several important themes that offer insight into how students engage with the assessment. Firstly, scenario-based questions continue to be a strength, but only when students fully understand the role or context they're being asked to respond within. When they can visualise themselves in the situation, whether it's as a support technician, analyst or developer, they're more confident in applying their knowledge effectively. However, to reach higher bands, students must go beyond surface level explanations. They need to explain both the how and the why. This was a common issue. Many responses started well, but failed to fully explore the impact or reasoning behind their statements, especially in questions worth more than 2 marks. The best performing students, so those achieving Band 3, produced answers that were structured, relevant and clearly applied their knowledge to the scenario. These responses often included well-justified conclusions and used appropriate technical vocabulary. And finally, it's important to note that data and digital analysis remains a weaker area overall. Questions involving evaluation of database structures, data visualization, or problem-solving tools were generally less successful. These topics may benefit from additional focus in both planning and delivery. So to support learners in addressing the weaker areas identified in Paper B, here are 3 key areas for targeted teaching and intervention. So first of all, focus on concept clarification. Some misunderstandings in the assessment came from confusing similar sounding terms. For example, black box testing was confused with black hat hacking, and many students couldn't differentiate between SAS and PASS. Clarifying these terms through direct comparison, examples and classroom discussion will help. Also revisit VPN protocols and cloud testing, ensuring students know not just what these are, but how and why they're used. Secondly, develop data and database literacy. So the questions involving databases, algorithms and data analysis were among the most challenging. Consider using simulations or real-life case studies to teach how relational databases work and how data can be visualized effectively. Integrate regular practice with pseudocode, flowcharts and problem-solving frameworks so students can become more confident in applying them. And then thirdly, focus on improving writing strategies. To access higher mark bands, students need to explain, evaluate and justify, not just describe. Support this by providing sentence starters and encouraging the use of scaffolds like Peel model, how to draw conclusions and link back to the scenario, so students build the habits needed for Band 3 responses. These teaching strategies can be woven into both theory and practical lessons to improve knowledge, retention and exam readiness. Now for some final thoughts around assessment objective patterns and some next steps. We'll start by looking at some of the AO1 common pitfalls. So when looking at AO1, as in recall of knowledge across both core paper A and B, a clear pattern emerges. Students generally perform well in AO1 questions when the content is familiar. For example, foundational digital concepts, common technical terms or frequently taught procedures. When terminology was regularly revisited in lessons, students were able to recall and apply it with confidence. However, significant gaps in recall were seen in questions involving less frequently revisited terms or more abstract concepts. This was particularly apparent with digital tools and service models like SaaS and PaaS, and cloud computing terminology and legislation, such as the Data Protection Protocols or the Equality Act. These gaps suggest that while students might understand a topic when it was first taught, they do struggle to retain and recall it under exam conditions unless it's regularly reinforced. So some implications for teaching. Strengthen AO1 performance by embedding low-stakes retrieval practice in every lesson, such as quick quizzes, flashcards or exit tickets. Use spaced repetition to bring back key terms from earlier in the course. Incorporate visual tools such as comparison charts, labelled diagrams and dual coding techniques to help cement understanding of abstract or technical terms. You could create tiered glossaries or knowledge organisers that grow over time and can be used for revision. And finally, use classroom dialogue and questioning strategies to ensure students can articulate what a term means and how it applies. Improving AO1 is about more than just memory. It's about deepening the familiarity and fluency students have with the technical language of the digital sector. When reviewing AO2, the application of knowledge, we saw clear improvements where students were given relatable scenario-based questions. For example, in both papers A and B, students performed well when asked to apply their knowledge to settings like digital service companies, law firms, museums or support centres, scenarios that reflect real industry roles. However, issues emerged when students had to apply their knowledge in more technical or abstract areas, such as database structures or cloud architecture. In these cases, they often relied on vague descriptions or misunderstood the scenario, which prevented them from accessing higher marks. So, implications for teaching. Continue to integrate real-world scenarios into lessons and assessments. This helps students visualise how their knowledge applies in practice, and build in activities that ask students to step into the role, so as a support technician, analyst or network engineer, to really strengthen contextual understanding. Use questioning strategies like what would you do if, or how would this work in practice, to develop application skills. And where concepts are abstract, provide worked examples that walk through the application of a theory step by step. Stronger AO2 performance is directly linked to how often students have had a chance to apply their knowledge in context. Finally, looking at AO3, analysis and evaluation. We saw some very promising work, especially in cybersecurity and infrastructure-based questions. Students were more confident when evaluating risks, impact and effectiveness in these familiar contexts. Questions like 26 on unauthorised access or 19 on network recommendations consistently produced Band 3 answers, with students using structured reasoning and drawing logical conclusions. However, evaluation remained a challenge in data and tool-related questions. For example, students struggle to assess the use of evaluation tools, testing strategies or data visualization methods. Often they described rather than evaluated and fail to include reasoning or conclusions. So some implications for teaching. AO3 needs to be modelled explicitly, so show students what a Band 3 answer looks like and compare it with a Band 2 or a Band 1 response. Use scaffolds such as Peel and evaluation sentence starters. For example, this is effective because, one challenge might be, a balanced view would consider. And include regular activities that ask students to agree or disagree with a statement, justify a decision, or weigh up pros and cons. Encourage students to always link their evaluation back to the scenario, as this helps maintain relevance and structure. Improving AO3 requires consistent practice with justification and critical thinking, It's not just about knowing the content, but being able to argue and reason effectively. To wrap up, the Autumn 2024 series gave us some clear messages about student strengths and areas we can support further. First, we need to strengthen evaluation writing across all topics. Whether it's cybersecurity, infrastructure or data analytics, students must be taught how to justify their answers, structure arguments and reach conclusions. This is key to accessing Band 3 in AO3. Next, we need to embed retrieval practice for key terminology throughout the programme. Technical language in areas like cloud services, legislation and testing tools can't be a one-off lesson. Students need regular spaced opportunities to revisit this language and build confidence in using it. A clear development area across both papers was data modelling and digital analysis tools. This is a topic that consistently saw low scores. It's worth reviewing how these concepts are introduced and reinforced over time, using real-life examples and step-by-step models to build understanding. And finally, we've seen time and again that students perform best when they can connect their knowledge to a real-world context. So it's essential that we continue to use realistic, scenario-based tasks in teaching, revision and formative assessment. Whether they're planning infrastructure for a company, supporting end users or interpreting customer data, students need to practice responding as if they're in the role. These steps, embedded consistently, will help build student confidence, raise performance across all AOs and ensure learners are ready for the demands of the core exams. Finally, we would really appreciate some feedback, so if you could take a few minutes to complete this feedback form, please. Your insights are really very valuable to us. So thank you for taking the time today to watch this video.